All you gotta do is relax, sit back. Let me tell a little story. I used to love sports, baseball and basketball. Actually, I lied. I hated baseball. I love basketball and football. Running track, yes sir, run it back. All day sports was the best thing. Madden '09, the best thing. I even love FIFA, soccer, and a little bit of hockey because it knocked you
Well, thanks,
off.
Space God, for bringing us in. And you know what time it is, Christian? It's time for October, November baseball.
Slash. I mean, because a team could, like, the fifth game is in November. The fourth game is still in October.
So if the Mets sweep, then it could be all October.
If there is a sweep, then there will be no November baseball. But more likely than not, there will be.
So, for those of you who don't know, or don't care, or don't watch baseball, shame on you, the Mets and the Royals are going to the World Series. The New York Mets, having won the National League, defeating an impressive pair of competitors, if I do say so myself, the Dodgers, who took them to 5 games in the opening round and lost because they couldn't get a damn base hit with men in scoring position.
Yep.
And the Cubs, who were just smacking home runs all over the Cardinals, and thankfully eliminated them in the division series where they should have been eliminated. Good job, Cubs. The Mets, the Mets pitching was like a buzzsaw, and it completely chewed up all of the Cubs' offense, and the Mets swept the Cubs in 4 games. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. I think a lot of people had the Cubs favored in that series. But I would say that performance makes them the slight favorite against the Kansas City Royals.
Nope. I can't see how you would possibly say that. First of all, congratulations to my New York Mets, the team that I support. The second year in a row that the National League representative in the World Series entered the playoffs with the lowest record. The Mets, despite being National League champions, you have to say that they got lucky with their seeding, especially in this playoffs, because they could have faced the Cardinals or the Pirates, and they didn't. They didn't have to face the 2 best teams in the National League on their way to the National League pennant. And, like, no small potatoes to the Dodgers and the Cubs, who were obviously very good teams that had better finishes than the Mets did in their regular season. But I highly doubt the Mets would be in this position if they had to have faced St. Louis or Pittsburgh.
Well, I mean, people said the same thing with the Golden State Warriors last year. Not that the Mets had the regular season that the Golden State Warriors did, but, I mean, it's inevitable that some teams get a quote-unquote easier route through the playoffs than other teams. I think what matters is that the Mets capitalized on their opportunities and made it as far as they have.
Oh, absolutely. You can only play the teams that are in front of you, but a lot of people talk about the randomness of the MLB playoffs. In the Mets' case, I would look towards luck as something that was a greater factor, because even though that Cubs team was better than that Pirates team in that 1-game sample in which they played, I don't think the experience of the Pirates would have failed against the Mets as the inexperience of the Cubs showed up at Wrigley Field especially.
I was just thinking about that because baseball has the longest regular season of any North American professional sport in terms of games played, certainly. And there's enough games played in regular season baseball for statistics to really matter because you get a pretty large sample size. But that all goes out the window in the playoffs. And as we know, hitting a baseball is really, really hard. And some teams get lucky hitting the baseball in one night. Some teams don't get lucky hitting the baseball in one night. And that often determines the outcome of playoff series and playoff games. And we're totally cool with that as baseball fans because even though we know it's a little bit insane, it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think the biggest example from this 2015 playoffs, talk about how hard it is to hit a baseball. Daniel Murphy obviously hasn't gotten the memo about how hard it is to hit a baseball.
No, in the regular season, I mean, he was a. I mean, you would be more familiar with his performance than I would have been, but with 14 homers and a good amount of RBIs, I could categorize him as a role player, middle of the lineup kind of guy. He's been in New York for a while now. Am I correct?
Daniel Murphy is the second longest tenured player on the Mets. He came up in 2007, I believe. It was 1 year after their NLCS loss to the Cardinals. He came up as a third baseman, and that's where he naturally plays. He unfortunately would have had to have ridden the bench because David Wright was in there as the permanent fixture at third base for the New York Mets going forward. So Murphy had to find a role elsewhere, and started off in the outfield, and he turned out to be a terrible outfielder. He then moved to first base as, hopefully as a corner position member he would do all right. And he was, only okay at the time. But then the Mets brought up a couple of minor league prospects in Ike Davis and Lucas Duda that could only essentially fit at first base. So Murphy's been spending the last couple of seasons at second base. A lot of people like to downplay his fielding. It's not bad. He's certainly a capable second baseman. He can pass for an average fielder. But you're right in saying that he is a role player because he's an average defender. He is a terrible base runner, regardless of what that decision.
Not the fastest dude.
Game 5. Yeah, he's a terrible base runner, and as a hitter, he's limited. He hits to contact. He's very difficult to strike out, but his batting average isn't as high as it should be for a guy that hits to contact. His power is very negligible. The 14 home runs he had this season were a career high. It doesn't help that he's done the majority of his hitting at Shea Stadium and Citi Field, which are both cavernous. But yeah, that Murphy was the one that has come out with a Ruthian-type postseason. Not the player in the Mets lineup that you would have chosen to come out of a slump like that, and not the lineup you would imagine any player coming out with a postseason like this. It's beyond explanation what Daniel Murphy's doing.
Yeah, and we should quantify what exactly Daniel Murphy has done. I believe he's had 6 straight postseason games with a homer.
Yep.
And how many postseason homers total? Do you remember?
7.
7 total postseason homers.
A home run in Game 1 against Kershaw, and then he went homerless in Games 2 and 3 of the NLDS, amazingly, somehow.
To nobody's surprise.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Let me give you something. Daniel Murphy right now has more postseason home runs than Willie Mays and Hank Aaron combined.
That blows the mind. That's completely... he's doing this in the course of one postseason.
Of course, of one postseason, yes. Daniel Murphy in this postseason, has a slugging percentage of 1.026. To put that in perspective, and I know this is a small sample size, but the best, or the player with the largest on-base percentage in a single season was Barry Bonds in 2004, and his was at 868. So even though it's a small sample size, that it's almost 200 percentage points higher than the highest regular season slugging percentage ever is astounding.
Yeah, well, can you quantify what exactly slugging percentage is? Because I'm still fuzzy on what the definition is, and I want to see if what I think it is right.
Slugging percentage, so the highest possible slugging percentage one can get is 4.000, and that is if someone hits a home run every time they're at bat. They get 4 total bases per at bat.
Okay, so it's basically counting the bases you get.
Essentially, yeah, but not counting the total bases you get. It's counting the total bases you get while up at bat. So a single is worth 1 point, a double is worth 2, a triple is worth 3, and a home run is worth 4. And all of those points are divided by plate appearances. And a good slugging percentage is around 400 to 500. And Daniel Murphy.
So that's about half a base per plate appearance.
Essentially, yes.
and Daniel Murphy is at over one base per plate appearance. Do you think he can keep this up in the World Series against the Royals pitching staff, which aside from the bullpen has been inconsistent?
Logic says no. Logic logic begs for a regression to the mean, especially with this long layoff the Mets have. But logic hasn't been applied at all to this postseason run for Daniel Murphy. And considering that he's done this against Lester and Arrieta and Greinke and Kershaw, it makes one think that perhaps if he gets to these generally inconsistent Royal starters, that he has an opportunity to top Barry Bonds and Carlos Beltran and Nelson Cruz as players who have had the greatest postseasons of all time.
And nobody would have saw this coming in the history of the world. This is why I love your New York Mets, and they beat my Dodgers, and that made me sad. But ever since the whole Wilmer Flores trade incident where he was weeping out there at shortstop because he thought he got traded, he didn't get traded. He hits a game-winning home run a couple days later, and ever since then, the Mets have looked special. And
yeah, Wilmer Flores definitely has an opportunity to become the David Freese of this postseason, especially. And if the Mets win the World Series, regardless of what Wilmer Flores does in the World Series, if he gets an over in the World Series, he will still never have to buy a drink in New York City ever again. Everyone knows his face. Everyone will just pay homage to him, regardless if he's a replacement level player or not.
Yeah, and that's what I love about the Mets, is that they've taken guys who, like Ruben Tejada, who had his leg broken by Chase Utley. Sorry about that. He was a guy who had also been on the Mets for a while. Am I correct?
Yeah, he's been on the team for 5 seasons, I believe.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say he's been outstanding in any of those seasons, but guys like him and Daniel Murphy and Wilmer Flores all put it together at the right time, right when David Wright comes back from injury. And I guess the feeling is that the Mets had to do something special with David Wright coming back and this possibly being his last season. You know, because his back issues are pretty bad. And it's honestly very surprising that he's still playing baseball.
Yeah, I'm as surprised as you are, to be perfectly honest, because we've talked about this before. Spinal stenosis is a degenerative issue. Basically, it can't ever improve. The only thing you can do is manage symptoms and manage inflammation. David Wright's back is never going to be as good as it is right now, which I'm sure gives him that extra motivation to do as much as possible in the short run, because he's not going to get a long run after this season, most likely. But if I were David Wright, and maybe I would change this opinion now, knowing what I know now of this Mets team and how successful they are in the playoffs, but boy, it would have been really tempting to just, take the money and say, you know what, I'm retiring. This back issue is not going to get any better. I have a family to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, no one would have blamed him for doing that, but he seems like the kind of guy who, he got to the NLCS in 06 when he was a young guy and hadn't been back to the postseason since. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct.
And hadn't gotten back to the postseason since. So when he sees the opportunity that the Mets had this year in getting Cespedes in, stepping up their offense at all levels and with their starting arms being amazing, I think he realized that this year was as good a shot as he was going to get.
Yeah. Regarding those mid-season trades, we talked about, or I guess I talked about, the luck that the Mets got in the draw. The Mets also got really lucky that essentially all of their mid-season moves worked out splendidly. It started off with Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe, and both of them ended up being very good platoon players. Then they decided to shore up their bullpen. It started with Tyler Clippard, who's a very good 8th-inning reliever. They missed on Eric O'Flaherty, and we still have yet to see whether Addison Reed is a good piece or not. But it was that Carlos Gomez, Wilmer Flores botched trade that really sent things into motion, because Carlos Gomez, instead of going to the Mets, ended up going to Houston and stinking it up for the entire second half of the season. And who knows what would have happened if Gomez returned to New York. Maybe he would have played a lot better than he did in Houston. But it seems as if the Mets got the far better deal by getting Cespedes and not giving up Wilmer Flores, allowing Wilmer Flores to become some sort of folk hero in Queens. And really to see all these mid-season acquisitions work out for the Mets, because a lot of playoff teams went all in with their mid-season acquisitions. Toronto went all in with Tulowitzki and Price, and that didn't work out for them, as it's been seen. Texas went all in by getting Cole Hamels, and that didn't work out so well either. Houston with Carlos Gomez, and that didn't work out. The Mets got really lucky that their gamble paid off.
Yeah, and gambles like this are made all the time in baseball, and since baseball is such a random and predictable yet unpredictable kind of sport that can go either way all the time. And a lot of people thought, you included, that the Mets would have to give up one of their young arms to get a good bat. And they didn't have to, and it's been great.
Oh, it's pretty stunning because the Mets offered up a young arm in the Gomez trade. Zach Wheeler, who's been on the DL all year, by the way, has stuff that is as good as anyone on the pitching staff right now. That rotation might have 5 aces next year. But offered up in the Flores trade, ended up not going through, was kept for the Cespedes trade, and that the Mets could get that sort of offensive boost without giving up any of their arms. I could not have predicted it in the midseason at all. No way.
Yeah, it's funny because it lined up right around the time when we saw the Mets. We saw them in early July, a little after July 4th, I think. And I remember the game we went to, they beat the Dodgers 8-0, and we left early so we could watch the Women's World Cup final. And you told me, why are the Mets getting all their runs for their West Coast road trip out on this one day? They can't sustain this.
No.
And I think they beat the Dodgers 2 out of 3 that series.
They did. They won the season series against the Dodgers, which would have given them home field advantage had they had the same record at the end of the season. But that doesn't matter nowadays.
Mm-hmm. So, your New York Mets will be starting Jacob deGrom on the mound in Game 1. Not deGrom.
Matt Harvey will be starting on Game 1.
Oh, wow.
And Jacob deGrom will be starting Game 2. There's the school of thought from their manager, Terry Collins, was that Harvey pitched the best game of the best pitch game for the Mets in the playoffs was Harvey Game 3 against the Cubs. Sorry, Harvey Game 2 against the Cubs. Or was that Game 1? No, it was Game 1 because deGrom pitched Game 5 against the Dodgers. Harvey Game 1 against the Cubs, best pitched game of... No, it was Game 2 because Syndergaard pitched Game 1. I am just messing up all over the place. He had the best pitch game. And Terry Collins also wants to save Noah Syndergaard, his rookie, for Game 3 when they return back to New York. He figures that pitching Syndergaard twice on the road early on didn't bode well for his confidence. And even though he pitched well, he ran up his pitch count early, and they had to bring in the bullpen too early. So Syndergaard will get the first start at home. Harvey will get Game 1, deGrom will get Game 2, Matz will get Game 4, and who knows what we'll see from there on out. Most likely a repeat of the rotation, but don't be surprised if Cologne gets in there for a spot start if either Syndergaard or Matz struggles in their first game against the Royals.
Yeah, I would expect to see Bartolo in a relief capacity in some of the games anyway, but yeah, he might get a start depending on how the rest of the starters do.
Bartolo and Jonathan Neese, but Bartolo more, have been designated as the long men for the Mets out of the pen. So say a starter gets knocked out in the second or third inning, it would be up to Bartolo or Neese to carry them into the late innings and hopefully manage any sort of damage that is done in those first couple of innings. But so far, they haven't needed that. Not at all.
No, their pitching overall has been quite stellar. Now, let's take a preview at their opponent, the Kansas City Royals. And actually, before we do that, let's talk about the American League playoffs. So, Houston beat the Yankees in the wild card pretty convincingly. Lost to the Astros in 5 games. Kansas City Kansas City. Wow, I really know nothing. Kansas City beat the Astros in 5 games.
Yes, there we go.
Texas beat. Who did they beat in the division series?
Texas lost in the division series to
Oh,
Toronto.
to Toronto, that's right. But it took 5 games because I remember because Toronto lost the first 2 in Toronto.
Yes.
Texas lost the next 2 in Texas, and Toronto finally put it away at home.
Yeah.
And so the ALCS was Toronto versus Kansas City. Poor Toronto, they were the darlings of everybody in Major League Baseball. Ever since the Troy Tulowitzki trade, they had been one of the hottest, if not the hottest team in baseball, right up there with the Mets. And they just couldn't get it done in the end.
No, and it was a bit disappointing for those fans that like fireworks in their baseball, because that Toronto-Kansas City series had the potential for a lot of benches being cleared, and it was a pretty tame series.
Yeah,
overall.
like during the regular season, those two teams have not been friendly at all, but I guess, it was all game-face playoff time.
Yeah, that had the potential to be really volatile, especially with playoff implications on the line. But Kansas City came in, and as much of a cliche as it is, it seems as if they had more experience than the Blue Jays did, which is so weird to say. The Royals have like playoff experience, but it really showed because the Royals know how to play their game. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts, single, double, the occasional home run, and just enough starting pitching to get them to their elite relief appearances.
Their bullpen is something special to watch because they all throw super hard, and some guys just aren't used to that from middle relievers, and it really throws off a lot of the hitting. And I'm really excited for the series because it starts in Kansas City because the American League won the All-Star game. Still bitter about Mike Trout getting a home run off of Zach Greinke.
Mm-hmm.
But, so the American League wins the All-Star game. Kansas City has home field. Who is going to be DH for the Mets in Kansas City, do you think?
You know what? I would not be surprised if the Mets designated Michael Conforto, their rookie left fielder. It seems as if Cespedes is good enough to play, and the ideal defensive outfield there would be Cespedes, Granderson, and Lagares out in center. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Terry Collins gave Michael Kadire one more shot. It seemed as if he got a couple of hits in his last few plate appearances in the Chicago series. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see Daniel Murphy get a shot at designated hitter, and seeing the Mets start Kelly Johnson out at second base, for instance. You might see Juan Uribe as well, because Uribe, who has been out for the entire playoffs, took some batting practice swings recently and might be healthy enough to be on the roster.
So I didn't hear about that. That's good to know.
Yeah. The Mets don't have too many stellar players on the bench, but it's deep enough that you can justify any one of their starters going in the designated hitter role. But it would be interesting to see who goes where.
Yeah, I like it when National League teams comes to American League ballparks and they have to put an evil, slimy, terrible DH. But you know what I like even more in that is when American League teams have to come to National League ballparks and watch their pitchers try to hit something.
Yeah, can you imagine the bloodlust of American League teams on the starting pitchers for the Royals? Because with Yordano Ventura and Edison Volquez and Johnny Cueto, that's enough. That is enough Dominican volatility to rustle up the jimmies of all the white pitchers in the American League. And I don't know if the Mets pitching staff has the same sort of animosity for them, but boy, I'm sure a lot of American League pitchers would be chomping at the bits for an opportunity to throw high heat at any one of those pitchers.
Well, they're not going to get the chance because they all got run out of the postseason or never made the postseason. So, when I would say that the series is at least even in predictions. I wouldn't say one team is heavily favored. The Royals are certainly more experienced than the Mets. They have their offense is probably going to be more reliable, maybe, unless Daniel Murphy keeps up this crazy tear that he's on. Cespedes has been kind of quiet in the previous couple of series, so he could light it up too.
Yeah. David Wright turned it on a bit at the end of the Cubs series, but he's been below average. Same with Lucas Duda, despite his monster Game 5. Wilmer Flores and Curtis Granderson have quietly had very good playoffs at the plate. You haven't noticed Flores because he's known more for his power at the shortstop position, and he hasn't been hitting home runs. But Flores has been a very reliable hitter at the plate for the Mets. And if the Mets hitters play to their average and, say, get a monster series from Cespedes or Murphy, then perhaps they have a chance offensively. But you look across the roster, and the Royals are the better base running team. The Royals are the better defensive team. The Royals have the better bullpen, and as you said, the more consistent lineup, the more reliable lineup. They don't hit many home runs, but that may not be so much of a factor considering both Kauffman Stadium and Citi Field are so cavernous that not a lot of home runs are hit there anymore.
Yeah, and so what's your prediction for this series? Winner and how many games?
So, even though I am more confident the Mets can come out victorious in this series than I would have predicted at the beginning of both the Dodgers and the Cubs series, I am not confident that the Mets starting pitching will be enough to take them into the promised land of the first World Series title in 29 years. I think the Royals get it done in 6. They'll win it at Kauffman. The Mets may make it interesting, but I think the Royals will win in 6.
Always the pessimist, maybe.
But you can't. The Mets don't have much of a right to be in this World Series. Their offense in the middle of the season was historically bad.
Yeah, it was last in the league.
And they entered the playoffs with the worst record of the 5 playoff teams. I know that there is a precedent for, the worst quote unquote playoff team to make it to the World Series. Heck, the Giants did it last year. But it's how many people predicted the Mets at the beginning of the season, then at the middle of the season, then at the beginning of the playoffs? How many people seriously thought they would be in this position?
Not that many people outside of Queens, I gotta tell you.
I can't imagine. Can't imagine many people in Queens thinking that.
Well, it's been a fun run, and I can't wait till it starts this coming Tuesday. World Series time. Oh, that would be tomorrow, wouldn't it?
Yes, that is tomorrow.
Oh my god. Well, I gotta get this up then. So, besides the World Series, the Wild World of Sports is churning into its higher levels of activity. NFL season is in full swing. The Chargers lost to the Raiders embarrassingly, and now I probably won't watch much football for the rest of the year.
Oh, you will. You will watch more football.
Well, okay. I mean, it gives me an excuse to wear my Chargers hoodie, which I like a lot.
Where are the Chargers standing? What's their record?
2-5. I believe their record would be their worst in their division now.
Yeah, that's not great.
No. It's not great. I would lose to every other team I would have the Chargers get beat by the Raiders. So, especially in San Diego.
Man, that's crazy because, I mean, it's as awful as cliched as it is to equate a team's success with its quarterback. How many teams in the NFL would you imagine would trade their quarterback for Phillip Rivers? I'd say all but maybe 5 or 6.
I wouldn't say that many, but a good number. A lot of people would like to have Phillip Rivers, and San Diego doesn't seem to like protecting Rivers or giving him any kind of run support or having a great fourth quarter defense to back up Rivers. It's all the everybody else is searching for a quarterback. San Diego is searching for everything else.
Yeah, that's not a great way to
and
really
poor
go
Rivers
forward.
is going to
Yes.
throw his arm out of his socket or something with that amount of. He averages way over 30 pass attempts a game, and I don't
That
see
is
how
a
it
lot.
can be sustained. Especially with that weird sidearm flick that he does. But he's been doing that since he was a teenager, so I bet he can handle that.
I recently heard a commentary saying that his wife is expecting their ninth child, I believe.
How is he going to
Which-
lift up his kid for throwing the football that much?
But the commentary that I heard was once that child is born, he will have enough people to run plays in his living room.
Oh, man. Philip Rivers, that's the perfect example of you do you, man. And
Yeah, and bless that wife, man, because I hope she has help raising those children because that,
they have the money to afford help, so.
absolutely, but like the dad's gone for at least 10 weeks out of the season.
Yeah, that doesn't even count preseason
No,
and training camp.
no.
Oh, man. Yeah, but, she's thinking about that retirement because when that comes in a couple of years, they got all the money to do whatever they please. Send all the kids to college.
Yeah, no, let's hope that Philip Rivers isn't a victim of any sort of long-lasting head trauma that'll, make him incapable of fatherhood.
Well, with the way he screams his head off, he might get the victim of another kind of trauma if somebody just decides to take a swing at him.
Poor victim.
So, in other sports news, the NBA season is starting in a couple of days.
Cool.
This Wednesday, the day after Game 1 of the World Series. And I'm sure many more Americans will be watching the NBA debut than will be watching Game 2 of the World Series.
More likely, yeah, more likely.
But I will endeavor to watch baseball, although I have been waiting for basketball to come back for quite a while, so I will flip the channels a bit. And luckily, since the Lakers are on national TV so much, even though they're terrible, I won't have trouble catching my team every once in a while.
Very nice.
The highest, most important news of this preseason is that Meta World Peace has made the Lakers roster. Now, he played for the most what?
The most important. Like, there's no other news that we need to talk about besides
Not
the
much.
Panda's friend making the roster.
And he did play for the Knicks in his last stint in the NBA, and I heard he was pretty awful back
Yeah.
then. Did you get some first-hand experience watching him on the Knicks?
Nope. To be perfectly honest, I did not watch that Knicks team. I have not watched many Knicks teams in the past few years, and that certainly was one of them.
Well, who else is going to teach Julius Randle how to elbow James Harden in the face?
Yeah, he Meta World Peace. Goodness, can you imagine? Is there an equivalent to Meta World Peace's career arc, like Chad Johnson, maybe, or Terrell Owens, like someone who was so dominant at what he did, but also so volatile, and yet kind of a good person at heart.
Yeah.
But would punch fans in the face for throwing drinks at him. Like, who's the equivalent of Meta World Peace?
And there is no equivalent. How
He's
could
just
you
a
be the
vanguard,
equivalent of somebody called Meta World Peace, formerly known as Ron Artest? For those of you who don't know him, he was drafted by the Bulls in '99, moved to the Pacers shortly thereafter, and became the best perimeter defender in the entire association. That Pacers squad in Reggie Miller's last year in, 2005, the Malice at the Palace?
Yeah, it was 05.
That was Reggie Miller's last year. That Pacers squad looked extremely likely to go to the finals.
Yeah, very good team.
But the famous Malice at the Palace incident when somebody threw a soda cup at Ron Artest and he barged into the stands going after the wrong person and it turned into a melee, that resulted in him being suspended for the rest of the season and then getting traded the season after. He left a lot of bad blood in Indiana, but he came to LA, helped the Lakers win their second chip in a row. He wasn't part of the 2009 team, but he was part of the 2010 team. Hit a big three-pointer in Game 7 of the finals. And he was generally loved by Lakerland. And then kind of just floated around the NBA for a couple of years, and we all figured he was done by last year, at least. You know, he played in, I want to say, China or Turkey or someplace like that for a little bit.
He was in China. And he changed his name to the Panda's friend, and he was a friend to all Chinese, apparently.
Yeah, and I listen to Jalen and Jacoby all the time because that's my favorite sports podcast. And Jalen Rose was mentioning that he played with basketball with Meta on like the retired NBA players basketball circuit. And he did not expect him to come back to the NBA, but here we have it. Meta World Peace is back in the association. What will he do?
You mentioning him being drafted in 1999, we are getting dangerously close to an NBA without players from the 90s. Let's try to think of all the players that played in the 1990s off the tops of our heads.
Kobe, KG,
Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce,
Tim Duncan,
Jamal Crawford?
No, he's not that old.
Really? Okay.
Ron Artest. No, he didn't. Yeah, he played at the end of '99, so I guess it's technically played in the '90s. Who else? I just found out the other day that Dikembe Mutombo played in the Association until like 2009, which is way later than I thought he did.
Yeah, he was in there for a while.
Yeah, he ended his stint with the Houston Rockets, I want to say.
Juwan Howard still isn't playing, is he?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
I think
Shane Battier?
No, Shane Battier retired at the end of the 2014 finals.
Yeah, he's out of the league.
Derek Fisher is now a coach.
Oh, Nowitzki?
Nowitzki, yes, he's still playing. When did he start playing, though? I want to say 99 for him as well.
I'm going to look it up really quickly. I'm just going to look up players from the 90s.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a list of that somewhere, but I'm pretty sure we got Kobe, KG, Paul Pierce.
Okay, according to NBA.com, there are 15 active players as of March 24th, 2015. So earlier this year, that are still in the NBA. So the semi-retired guys, so players that have not retired yet but are out of the league, Jermaine O'Neal, Ray Allen, and Andrei Kirilenko.
Yeah, Andrei Kirilenko's... He started last season with the Brooklyn Nets, and he left for CSKA Moscow, his old Russian league team. But after that season, he officially retired. So he is retired from all basketball now.
Sean Marion and Elton Brand.
Sean Marion and Elton Brand both retired at the end of this last season.
We mentioned Paul Pierce. Andre Miller, I'm pretty sure, is still in the league.
Andre Miller plays with Timberwolves now. Professor Miller, PhD.
Nazir Muhammad?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. He says he's still with the Bulls, but I could be wrong about that. This article is a few months old. Oh, Vince Carter. I could forget Vince Carter.
Oh, VC! Yes, still with the Grizzlies.
Yep. We mentioned Kobe and Garnett. Jason Terry. I can't believe we had forgotten him.
Why am I blanking on Jason Terry? I know that.
Jason Terry's with the Rockets right now.
Oh, yeah. The Jet.
Pretty cool. Yeah. And, I had no idea. Ginobili was drafted in 99.
I thought he was 2000. But he must have been...
No idea. So that's a lot more players than I thought. It might seem we have a few more years left of players from the 90s, but it is really sobering to think about the new age of basketball, and the first time that we conceived of basketball as a sport, these guys were playing, and they were not only playing, but they were stars in the league, and that they're still in the NBA it's quite fantastic.
I really like that about basketball, is that the veterans can still contribute in important ways. It's tough for players that old to contribute in football, certainly. I would say hockey also has a lot of older veterans that contribute. Don't forget Jaromir Jagr, who is 5 years older than the next oldest person in the NHL. That's just completely ridiculous.
Still productive. Jaromir Jagr has more goals this year than the Anaheim Ducks.
Anaheim Ducks are god-awful. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I don't know what's up with that. They went to the conference finals last year. What is going on? Somebody tell me.
It's early. Hockey.
How are the New York Rangers starting out?
They're in first in the East right now.
Well, they did with the President's Cup last year, didn't they?
Yeah, they were the best regular season team last year. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year and could not get past Tampa Bay. However, the Rangers are starting off quite well, just like they did last season. It's a pretty good time to be a Mets/Rangers fan in New York, despite the fact that there probably aren't a lot of Mets/Rangers fans. I think Matt Harvey is the most visible of those, although technically you could argue that he is a Yankees fan. But yeah, it's a good time for New York right now. Great time. And the Jets, oh my goodness, they're 4-2. And
yeah, the Jets are, and they had their yearly quality loss against the Patriots.
The Jets usually pull out their yearly how the hell did this happen win against the Patriots. They more often than not have beaten the Patriots.
Oh, they have one more opportunity for that, and it'll be in Foxborough, won't it? Or
no, it'll be in New York.
Oh, it'll be in New York. Okay, even better.
Sorry. It will be in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It will not be in New York.
Yeah, the same difference.
No, it really isn't. East Rutherford is not New York City.
I know. So, let's get back to basketball and finish our season preview real quick.
Sounds good.
Over under 30 wins for the New York Knicks.
I'm going to say over, if only because they play in a really bad division. Like, that division has the opportunity to have the two worst teams in the NBA in Brooklyn and Philadelphia. Get this. In the trade that Boston had with Brooklyn that got Brooklyn Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, one of the things they got back was the 2016 first-round pick, which means that the Celtics could finish. The Celtics are a pretty decent team. They could finish as a playoff team in the East and get the number 1 overall pick next year if Brooklyn is as bad as advertised.
As a Lakers fan, that makes my blood crawl. To know that the Celtics have done this rebuilding job so damn well. I mean, it's certainly not done. And they're not contenders by any stretch of the means until somebody gets rid of LeBron James. But, man, Boston is set up for a really bright future. And they got David Lee, and I always like David Lee.
They got David Lee, which he's going to be insanely popular in Boston because David Lee's always been a productive offensive player. And it can't be overstated that Boston really, really likes their white basketball players. Kevin Love would have been the ultimate saint.
They're in love with Kelly Olynyk's hairdo. Who could love David Lee, but Boston?
Yeah. David Lee's a very nice consolation prize for not getting Kevin Love.
Well, and so over under 30 wins for my Los Angeles Lakers.
I think that's going to depend on whether Kobe Bryant is healthy or not. If he's healthy, I think they cannot get 30 wins. There's no way that they can if he's healthy.
I knew you were going to flip it. Like that.
If he rides the bench and allows these young players to find themselves and play team basketball, It's possible. I still don't see it happening just because the West is so tough, but I will stand by my theory that the Lakers will be a lot better without Kobe Bryant on the floor.
Shame on you, Christian. He is still the best basketball player on that team, which isn't saying much, but he is still the best player.
I agree with you, but he's also the most parasitic. That team does not play as a team when Kobe Bryant is on the floor, and I don't blame any players for not standing up to him because he is like a top 10 all-time player, but like you've seen them when he jacks up 25 shots at his
I've also
age
seen
now.
games where he had 17 assists just last year. He's a great passer. He's a great playmaker.
He's an excellent passer when he puts his mind to it. The Lakers need Kobe Bryant to get the heck out of Los Angeles. And only for basketball reasons. Like, Kobe Bryant is the only reason why that team gets on TV. That's the only reason why people go to Staples Center. He's the reason why the Lakers are still more popular than the Clippers, despite the Clippers being a potential title contender this year. However, as a basketball team, Kobe Bryant does not make them better. He makes them worse.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on this, but I will say that after this season, depending on how it goes for Kobe, if he plays more than, 50-something games and he looks good by the end of the season, who knows what will happen? Because the Lakers will certainly be reluctant to give him another contract because they want to get on with this whole rebuilding thing. But they won't want him to play for anybody else in the association because that would give the Buss family nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
He might go and play abroad in like Italy or something, like his dad did, because he grew up in Italy and he's always said that he might want to play basketball in Italy at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He currently has his most lucrative advertising contract, his sponsorship deal is with Turkish Airlines. Perhaps he goes to Turkey.
Could be. They do have a lot of good EuroLeague
I
teams.
definitely foresee. I think it is more likely that Kobe Bryant plays overseas than coming to the Knicks, for example, or going back to the 76ers, for example.
No, I don't think he would go to any of those teams. And if Kobe stayed in the association next year, I think he'd want to play on a contender. Because I think he really could help a contender. Because the reason why Kobe Bryant becomes an offensive black hole sometimes on this team is that he doesn't really respect the ability of his teammates. But let's say if, you swapped him and Richard Jefferson on the Cavaliers, I think he would play really, really well on that team and do a lot to make that team good.
Yeah, okay, so you honestly think Dan Gilbert's going to pay...
No, see, that's the thing. Kobe would have to accept... If you want to play on any contender, not just the Cavaliers, Kobe would have to accept veteran minimum because he gets paid $25 million a year over these 2 years for the Lakers because he's a Lakers legend and he still sells jerseys like hotcakes. He gets them on national TV all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If he wants to be a role player on a contender, he has to give up all that. And the Buss family sure as hell hope that doesn't happen because, there's not a lot of guys that start with one team and end with that same team. Sure. Jordan didn't even do it. He probably ended his Bulls career too early, and then he wanted to get back in with the Wizards, and those were subpar years that everybody wants to forget. Paul Pierce has done a good job building his legacy outside of Boston.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite moment of the playoffs last year was Paul Pierce's fall away bank shot at the horn to beat the Hawks. I called game. My God, I will remember that forever. I watched that live and I jumped out of my chair.
Pretty impressive stuff.
So,
all right, so Sean.
Yes.
Who do you think is best equipped in the West to challenge the Warriors?
Well, everybody. First of all.
Yeah.
The main contenders in the West would be the Warriors, the Spurs, the Rockets, the Clippers. Am I forgetting any major players here?
You know what? last year I would have said both Portland and Dallas, but they seem to have taken
Both of those
strong
are lottery teams now.
Yeah. You know what? I think the West is not nearly. They're still as talented. The quality teams are still quality in the West. There just aren't as many of them. I feel. I think it's those four that are vying for the time. Sorry, those five when you add Golden State into the mix.
You know, as far as teams that could challenge the Warriors I feel are still the best team in the West. Their defense is still the best in the entire NBA, which cannot be overstated. Their passing is ridiculous, and their shooting is also ridiculous. But I would say the team best equipped to challenge them would be the Houston Rockets, who met them in the conference finals last year. And you could see James Harden had a couple games where he was a maestro when he was dishing out assists and scoring, 40-plus points. But he also had, I remember the last game, he had like 12 turnovers. And so they went out and they got a ball handler and a playmaker in Ty Lawson. And with Ty Lawson starting at the point and James Harden getting to play off the ball more, I think that's really going to help take this Houston team over the top, and I think they could win the Western Conference.
I think if everything falls right for the Rockets, then they have the best shot. As you said, Dwight Howard and James Harden are a force, and now that Harden's going to play off the ball, he will be less responsible for playmaking, and he can be more effective as a scorer, much like what Kevin Durant does in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, we can't forget them.
Cannot forget them.
They
One of my favorite players in the NBA, Steven the Kiwi legend Adams. Have you seen his hair this year?
Pretty impressive now.
That's who I want to be in my dreams. I want to be a muscled New Zealander with wonderful hair.
All right, follow your dreams, man. Can't really blame you for that. But
we forgot to talk about the Thunder and the contending Western Conference teams.
Yeah, well, I thought I just added them right now. Can't forget about Oklahoma City. As long as if you have two of the 10 best players in the NBA, then you have a shot, no matter what happens.
Yeah, that's pretty true.
But regarding Houston, I think a lot has to fall correctly because, for instance, Dwight Howard revealed that he played most of the playoffs hurt, and nothing has shown that his injury has improved. Ty Lawson is battling with drug problems, alcohol-related problems, and James Harden, you never know how he's going to react to Lil B's preseason curse put upon him once again. So if there's any team that I feel like has the best shot at taking down Golden State, even though they're not as talented as Houston, in my opinion, it's hard to go against San Antonio, especially after their heartbreaking loss in the first round last season. I think they have motivation to go further, and now they have arguably the best power forward in the Western Conference, not named Anthony Davis, coming in to replace the best power forward of all time in Tim Duncan.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Duncan will slide over to center, and he's played a lot of minutes there over the years, so he should be comfortable there. And the Spurs team will be interesting to watch because, the whole question is, can Kawhi Leonard finally be an all-star? We know his defense is elite, probably the best perimeter defense in the entire league. But can he take more of the scoring load? Do Tony and Manu have much at all left? And can they sustain it through a long postseason run? There's a lot of questions about the Spurs team, but LaMarcus Aldridge has already looked really good for them in preseason.
Don't forget about David West coming in.
Oh, yeah.
David West was the best player on the Pacers last year, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And he comes in on a veteran's minimum trying to win a championship before he goes out in a blaze of glory. There's going to be no rest for power forwards on the defensive end in the West when they're playing San Antonio. If you're going up against Timmy D, David West, and LaMarcus Aldridge, who are you going to throw at him?
Don't forget Boris Diaw and Matt Bonner.
Yeah, and I shouldn't. Thiago Splitter's not on the team anymore, is he?
No,
They traded him?
they lost both Tiago and Aaron Baines over this
Yeah,
offseason.
yeah, yeah. But that Spurs team, they have the best coach in the league. They still have 3 Hall of Famers on their roster. How interesting is it that Tony Parker seems to have aged more quickly than Tim Duncan?
I mean, and big men generally do age pretty well because as long as they have a good skill set and good basketball knowledge, they can. They Tim Duncan doesn't have much of a vertical leap left, but he knows when to jump to block a shot, to contest a shot, or to get that jump hook off at just the right time. And I think, like I said, I just learned that Dikembe Mutombo played until 2009. Big men can
Mhm.
last a long time. Explosive, shifty, elusive point guards like Tony Parker, it's hard to keep up that explosiveness well into your 30s. Manu certainly doesn't have the explosiveness that made him one of the league's best swingmen for a number of years.
All right,
But
quickly, does anyone challenge Cleveland in the East?
no, although
Okay, that was quick.
I like the Bulls. I read a really good piece in ESPN the magazine about Jimmy Butler, written by Pablo Torre actually,
Mm.
and no, Pablo Torre wrote the piece about James Harden. Somebody else wrote a piece about Jimmy Butler. I also I read both of those pieces. The Jimmy Butler piece was interesting. He talked about how he spent his off season in San Diego, hanging out with his buddies and training really really hard. I wonder if Derrick Rose will ever be back to who he used to be. I doubt it, but I think he'll improve. Although, bad luck that he got his face shattered in training camp.
Yeah.
Um,
Man, it seems as if the East was historically bad last year. It's not any better this year. It,
no,
it might
certainly not
it might
versus
be
the
worse
West
this year.
anyway.
It might be worse because Atlanta came out last year, like surpassing everyone's expectations. But it's not as if they got any better in the offseason.
No, they lost Amari
Yeah,
Carroll.
Amari Carroll leaves the team, and that's a big blow. They still have 4 returning All Stars, but they're not any better. Toronto isn't any better. Um,
Well, they
and
added Amari Carroll.
yeah, I guess, but I mean, I don't think Toronto can like Toronto feasted on a terrible division last year, and that division's going to get a little bit better because the Knicks are going to be respectable and Boston's going to compete for a playoff spot. Um, but the East right now, besides like maybe the Indiana Pacers, I can't see any team like improving so much upon their previous season.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacers are the obvious candidate to improve because they had Paul George was out for almost all of the season because he
Mm.
fractured his leg in Team USA camp that summer. Paul George at the power forward is interesting to me, but I think I really miss Paul George being this, an all NBA team player.
Hmm.
And I mean, he was one of the top 10 players in the league before he got hurt. So I really
A
want
lot.
to see him get back to that level.
In that season where Indiana got the number 1 seed, a lot of people were talking Paul George is the third best player behind LeBron and KD, and he had a year off, yeah, and we'll see how that leg responds. But it's I don't think any of us should be surprised if he comes in and tears up the league again. He was that talented,
Yeah, he's a fun player to watch too. I love it. His dunks and his celebrations, and I love the way he plays.
most definitely.
So, who do you pick in this NBA season to go to each conference finals, and then who do you pick to win the championship?
I think it would be irresponsible to choose anyone but Cleveland to come out of the East. A lot of things could go wrong. Um, LeBron James could hurt himself finally after all these seasons, and if he goes down, then that opens up the door for Atlanta. It opens up the door for Chicago, possibly even Toronto or Indiana. But as presently constructed, there is no one who can challenge Cleveland, as you said. Out of the West, it's much more of a crapshoot. Um, I don't think Golden State got any worse. They only lost one rotation player in David Lee, and until they have to start paying their players a lot more money than they're doing now, their window of opportunity is just going to continue expanding. And I think the only thing that can defeat the Golden State Warriors this year is themselves. If they lull themselves into a Miami Heat type of mid-season coasting that doesn't translate into playoff success, then perhaps they can go down. But I think we're going to see a rematch this year. Golden State and Cleveland are quite clearly the best teams in their conferences.
I got to say that Golden State, I don't think they're the kind of team to have a mid-season slump. And, I hope Coach Steve Kerr gets better soon, because his back is going to keep him out of the season opener. And guess who's going to be coaching the Golden State Warriors game 1 and through the early part of the season?
Is it Mike Dunleavy Jr.?
No. It's someone even whiter than Mike Dunleavy Jr. It is Luke Walton.
That's right. It was one of those sons of white players.
Luke Walton, Lakers legend, 2-time NBA champion, passer extraordinaire, is now going to be the on-site head coach for the Golden State Warriors until Steve Kerr could get better.
I can't say I've ever heard Luke Walton talk. Is he anything like his dad? Because Bill Walton's the coolest guy on earth.
I can't say I've heard Luke Walton talk either, but I'll watch a Warriors game this year, and I'm sure we'll get to see a sideline interview with him. He's probably not quite as hippie-ish as his dad, because I don't think anybody could ever top Bill Walton in the hippie Olympics.
I love Bill Walton. I think we would be remiss talking about NBA coaches without mentioning the passing of Flip Saunders.
Yes, Flip Saunders, the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's been the anchor of that franchise for a long time. And, when he came back in his second stint, they gave him the reins, and he has rightly put together a squad that looks like it's going to grow and grow well.
Yeah.
With Andrew Wiggins, with Karl Anthony Towns, with Zach LaVine, Gorgie Zhang. It looks like a young squad that probably won't win too much this year, but if those players keep going on the tracks that people project them to go on, they can really do good things. And Minnesota deserves success like that. And I really like Kevin Garnett's tribute to Flip Saunders, which he just sat down in front of his parking space and just kind of contemplated.
Yeah.
Because when Kevin Garnett was a scrawny teenager coming straight out of high school, Flip Saunders was his coach. And he molded him into the MVP of the league, the best defensive player, and a superstar who is still getting them checks about 20 years into his NBA career. And by the way, who do you think has made the most money all time, strictly in player contracts, in NBA history?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's Kevin Garnett.
It's 100% Kevin Garnett.
Yeah, if anything, I will remember Flip Saunders for Kevin Garnett, because I can't honestly say that I know too much about Flip Saunders. I think my immediate reaction to his death was how quickly of a turnaround it was, because we heard in the offseason that he was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and just a day before the Timberwolves released the statement announcing the passing of their head coach, they had announced a statement saying that he was not going to coach the first game and may in fact need to take a longer leave of absence than initially predicted. And the next day he was gone. And not to get all philosophical on a frivolous sports podcast, but it's times like these that allow us to reflect on the fragility of our own existence, and it makes us thankful for even the ordinary days. And rest in peace, Flip Saunders. If he believes in another side, I hope he's there. Hope he's chilling. And I think that most players will play their first game of the season with a heavy heart, especially Minneapolis.
Yeah, and his reach extended very far. Stephen Marbury, who was killing it in China, played very well for the Knicks for a number of years, started his career in Minnesota, and he made a great post about Flip Saunders and what he meant to him. And, Andrew Wiggins, a lot of the young guys from this team. I mean, he drafted Karl Anthony Towns. He was there and pretty healthy for the draft and the initial preparation, so Karl Anthony Towns got to know him. And it's sad that he won't be able to see his team come together. And I heard that Rick Carlisle, who's the president of the NBA Coaches Association, said that in honor of Flip Saunders' memory, all coaches will wear lapel pins like Flip Saunders usually did.
Very good tribute. Very, very nice of Carlisle to do.
So, what else is going on? NBA season starting soon. World Series starts tomorrow.
You know what? I am going to be very relieved once the World Series ends, because this baseball season has been very tense, and I think I'm just going to be happy to settle into a basketball and a hockey beginning of the season where you can enjoy games without caring too much about their implications. I think the fall and the winter are going to be very kind to me, especially since I am not caring so much about football, which seems to be a stressful weekend for everyone every weekend.
Oh my gosh, yes. Football is just so condensed because, with only 16 games in a season, every game matters so damn much, and if everybody gets upset or gets elated, there is no middle ground in football, really.
Nope. And I think that's one blessing of these 82-game seasons and 162-game seasons, is that you can tune out and turn off for a really long time, jump back in when you need to, and you won't have missed too much. And if you want to watch a game in the middle of the season just for the sake of enjoying it, you can. Go ahead.
All right, and I think that about wraps it up. We'll see you on the other side of the World Series, I guess.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun. Let's go Mets. Please, base God, put good vibes, good energies towards the Mets. No cooking dances on our teams. And pray for James Harden, man, because that curse, that seemed to really affect him during the playoffs. And, oh, man, hopefully he'll be all right for the regular season.
No black person is ugly. 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 Make another dime a day, tryna make a rhyming way. Sometimes my skin is the reason I'm alive today. Bigger than just a race, no car, just a race. No smile, fix your face, we all living in this place. Tryna make peace with the police. I'm not on probation, so why you out asking me? This is not just about black, I wonder about black. When we talk about that, you wonder why I talk back. My English not perfect, I'm not the best at school, but understand I love life's rules. Homeless people, they even give me money. I'm too real for the game. Reflection of the fame. I got cash, I hide all the pain. They skin black people, they won't say a thing. That drama is a shame. They wanna kill you before they even know your name. Sunshine, sunshine, looking for the sunshine. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. Sunshine, sunshine, looking for the sunshine. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. Sunshine, sunshine, for the sunshine. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. No black person is ugly, don't say it one time. No black person is ugly, don't say it